Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're going to be checking out a video that was produced by a European. This title is How I See the USA as a European After a Month There. I don't really think, I'm not being rude or disrespectful, but I don't really think a European can really give a solid context of the United States due to the fact that most of the things that will affect you long term in the United States will never affect you as a European in the United States. Simply put in stuff that, like, probably the only thing that could affect you as a European in the United States is safety. In my humble opinion, that's what I think, because education is a big thing that affects so many Americans, student loans and so on and so forth. And another thing is simply just, having to go to the hospital, pay a lot of money. A lot of these things affect Americans, and I don't really think it's going to affect a European, in my humble opinion, who's going to be there for a month, unless you're there for like a whole lifetime. I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts and feedbacks in the comment section are. But thank you for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe. And yeah, without further ado, let's check out this video.
I've just spent the last month crossing the United States, and as a French person, I have to say that I have a lot of thoughts. So the US is such a fascinating place to me, and it feels like a lot of people have strong opinions of the country. Like, some people really love it, some people absolutely hate it, and I want to give you my unique perspective as someone who once lived in the US but has chosen to leave it for Europe. But first, I want to tell you about a few thoughts I have about the US after this one-month journey. So during my trip, I crossed the US from east to west, going from New York to San Francisco by train. And this took around 4 days. So my first impression is that the US is such a massive country. Like, France, where I'm from, in comparison, is roughly the size of Texas. And even though I feel like I know the US pretty well, since I used to live there for a few years, my partner of 8 years is from Chicago, and I've personally been to around 15 states. However, the country is just so big that I feel like I have so much more to discover. And I do feel that life in the US can be very different.
You do. There are so many different variations to the United States that even Americans don't even know. Like, it's really complicated. Just think about Europe and how many different languages and cultures and so on and so forth is there. And when you really think about America, there's a lot more differences that you can find when you dive deep into a particular area, particular region,
different depending on where you live. Obviously, living in a big city like New York is not the same as, for example, living in rural Texas, where I've also been. But there's many different local cultures depending on where you are in the country.
Yes.
But anyway, just crossing the US, the other thing I felt is that the nature is so beautiful, and there's so much empty space and untouched natural beauty that changes quite a lot from a state to another. For example, we crossed Colorado and we went into the snowy Rockies, which are very different from, let's say, the type of nature you can see in Utah, which we also crossed. And by the way, from the train, there were places that we could only see from the train, like no roads go there, and this really showed me how much empty space there is in the US. And in France and in Europe in general, there's way fewer places like that. I feel everything is so much smaller. It is way harder to find a place where there's not a little village or there's not other people. And taking a train across the US is obviously more about enjoying the journey than going efficiently from point A to point B, but it made me think quite a lot about how the US is still a very car-centric society. In Europe, we have a really good network of bullet trains and trains that go pretty much everywhere, and obviously this comes with the size of the countries. France is pretty tiny if you compare it to the US, but I feel our network of trains and public transport is really good, and you don't need a car as much. And just to give you an idea, my boyfriend Bobby, who is from Chicago, he got his license when he was 16 and he started driving at 14. Well, on my side, you can start driving at 16 and then get your license when you're 18 in France. I actually only got my license a few years ago because I live in a big city, I don't need to use a car, and I just didn't feel the need because I have a bike and I have public transport.
If I'm being honest, if I was living in Paris, I would not care to have a license, even in South Finland, because you guys know, if you're new to the channel, I moved to Finland a while back. I live in North Finland, but for me, in North Finland, you do need a car. You got to have a junkie or a good car, whichever one. You need something. Plus, it's hella cold up here. It's like minus 18 right now outside. So good luck walking. Yeah, you need a car. Here in North Finland, absolutely you need a car. But South Finland, hell no, you don't need no car. You got a train, you got everything. Plus, the weather there is 10 times more applicable for walking, if that makes sense.
And I do feel that some places in the US are just meant for cars. Like if you walk there, people will look at you and think you're a bit crazy. Like for example, when I went to Buc-ee's in Texas, I didn't have a car and I had to sit on the ground in the parking lot to eat my food because there was no other space for me to sit. And you know, you're probably wondering what I was expecting because Buc-ee's is a gas station. But I do feel that even in gas stations in Europe, you do have more places where you can sit. You don't have to eat in your car. Recently, cars
Really?
have gotten even bigger.
I don't know. Like, you know what? To be honest, it's because North Finland. I think North Finland is corrupting my idea of Europe and Finland in general. Because I've always said this. Finland reminds me of mini United States, right? But the thing is, with gas stations here in North Finland, you don't have anywhere where you actually go to. You just go pay for gas and you get the hell out of there. It's a gas station, right? But the reality is when you go more south in Finland, there are actually places where you can actually go inside and actually have a sat.
Even in New York City, it feels like everyone has one of those massive trucks or SUVs. And for me, as someone who likes to bike or walk, it feels a tiny bit less safe because I feel that these are so big that if they hit me, I will die on the spot. At the moment, I'm currently pretty excited about cars because we got to test a self-driving car when we were in SF. So as you can see, there was absolutely no driver. It was just us and the car. And I can tell you that it was a bit freaky at first, but it was also so fun getting to try an absolutely new thing. And that's overall something I really love.
Waymos are pretty cool, but I've seen a lot of videos about them and they have a lot of catching up to do, but Waymos are pretty cool.
Love about the US is this openness people have to new ideas and innovation. Like you can rebuild your own life how you want it here. And I feel in France there's more a set way to do things. And I've personally loved this influence in my life of, you know, following your own path and trying new things because it's what pushed me to quit investment banking, which was the career path I studied all my life for, and instead to do what I'm doing now, which makes me so much happier. And you know, maybe one of the reasons why things are like that is because the US is such a diverse country that's built on immigration. If you take the example of Bobby's family, they all came to the US many years ago, 200 plus years ago, because they were looking for a better life for themselves. Whereas my family, on the Spanish side, my dad is Spanish, has lived in the
200 plus years ago. I think that's being exaggerated. 200 plus years ago oh, come on. Whoever is telling you that number needs to be slapped. 200 plus years ago. Okay. 1776 was last week, bro. Come on now. So his family founded the United States. I'm sorry.
same village for at least 10 centuries, and only the younger generation started to move out. And you know, Europe as a continent is obviously very diverse. There's many literal countries that are next to each other. So a lot of people don't think too much about the US being diverse because people speak the same language and live in the same country, as compared to Europe, where I can take a 2-hour train and be in a fully different country with a different language and a different currency. But in the US, there's actually many communities from all over the world. And one thing that surprised me at first is how important heritage is. Like, people will tell you I'm half German, I'm Italian, when they mean obviously.
That's not very true. That's just to some people. That's not very true. And I'm not trying to be very mean, but it's mostly European heritage that matters. You do have other heritage that people, you know, uphold, but most people from African American side do not really hold up a lot of heritage. Like, no, they have cultures similar to past places, but a lot of the heritage is wiped out because of, you know, what happened. So that's not very true. That's for a selective piece of the United States, but that's how the United States is. Only a selected portion gets talked about either way, so
Obviously, one of their grandparents came from one of these countries. And one thing that actually shocked me is that people will actually ask you directly about your ethnicity. Like, people will ask you, what is your ethnicity? In France, this is such a big no-no. Ethnic statistics actually were forbidden after World War II. So you can't just ask people their ethnicity, for example, at a job interview or for anything that's official. And the first time I was asked about my ethnicity, it actually made me feel super bad. I was like, why do you want to know? Why does it matter? Because it has been ingrained in my mind that it's just another tool for discriminating against people. There's way more to this topic, but this is supposed to be a light and fun video, so we won't get too deep into that. To keep it light though, one thing I do love about the US is that people are so nice. It is so easy to talk to.
You on the right side of town, mama. Step on the wrong side of town, it ain't like that.
People. In the train, we were seated next to complete strangers, and it was just so fun to talk to them. We had great conversations, and that has been my overall experience in the US, from random strangers complimenting me randomly to cashiers making small talk, or even my all-time favorite, which is older ladies calling me honey or sweetie. I really love it. And obviously this is more true outside of New York City. Like, for example, when I was in Texas to film my Buc-ee's video, everyone was so nice. I had the best small talk there. But at first, when I moved to...
See how she put New York on the map? It was a little bit different in New York.
The US, I didn't really master the art of small talk because it's not really a thing in France, and I feel there's a way of making small talk that's just not talking about the weather but also keeping things light as well. But before I tell you my favorite thing about the US, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Vasco. The Vasco Translator V4 is a portable translator that allows you to connect with 90% of the world population with over 8 as a country. Like, there's always another thing I love about it. Click the link in the description below and use my code for a discount. Another thing I love about the US is how festive it is as a country. Like, there's always something going on. We started our trip around the Halloween period in New York City, and the decor was so cool. All the houses had this very spooky fall decor. People dressed up on the day off, little kids were trick-or-treating, and that's something I've personally took from the US.
And if I told you this, you'd probably say I'm lying. Not everywhere in the United States actually celebrate Halloween the way how it is celebrated in a lot of other places, and that's just real life.
Culture and add it in my everyday life. France is not as festive as the US. We do celebrate holidays, but it's a bit less intense. It's maybe more seen as a religious thing. So now I'm pretty much celebrating everything. I'm doing Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas obviously, was already doing it, Valentine's Day, Easter, 4th of July, you name it, I'm gonna celebrate it. And I've also seen this festive atmosphere in sports. Over the years, I've become a bit of an NFL fan, and a lot of people have commented about my Chicago Bears mug, and I know it's a tough team to support because they do tend to lose a lot, but it has been so fun. Like, I feel sports in the US is way more inclusive and family friendly, where I do feel sometimes in Europe, and of course I'm making a big generalization, people use that as an excuse to get drunk. Alright, I've said it. If you're a European sports fan, just come at me in the comments. That's just my personal opinion. But you know, those game tickets, they're very expensive in the US, and that's a thing that I'm not always a fan of. I feel the US...
That's why them boys get that big check, you know what I mean?
As a whole is more of a consumer society than France. And of course, we can't idealize France. France is also a consumer society, but I feel a lot of things in the US are made to make you spend money. And you know, as a whole, it's way nicer to shop in the US. The return process is so much easier. There's usually no questions asked. When in France, you're not always sure a store is gonna take your return. There's so many sales in the US, and I personally like making bigger purchases, like when I bought my computer or my phone in the US. But in return, there's more big chains, which I'm not always a fan of. I do try to go to those smaller shops, like this super cute bagel shop that we went to in New York, instead of, you know, bigger chains, because I feel these have a soul, like they feed me on a deeper level. It's so nice to see the people who actually make your food than, you know, just eating food that's industrially made. But I won't go into too much detail because I've already made so many videos about food. Obviously, people have bigger houses than in France, and people tend to shop more for stuff, always getting the newer thing, newer car, newer clothes, phones, and so on. And
when someone you love dies, you will know emptiness. I'm gonna kill them. Every single one of them.
You can really see that at thrift shops in the US when I thrift. There's always stuff from that season that's also being sold in shops right now, or from just a few seasons ago, whereas in France, in thrift shops, you can find stuff that's way older. The other thing that kind of surprised me is the cult of credit cards. People love like having credit card points and talking about credit cards. I do feel while points are great, there's still money that you have to spend, and credit card debt is more of an issue in the US than in France. Another thing that's different in France is the price that's shown, for example, on a restaurant menu is the price you're actually gonna pay. All the prices are inclusive of tax and tip in France. And don't even get me started about tipping, because I do feel things have gotten a bit out of hand with the iPad machines. I always try to tip generously, and I always feel like I'm disappointing someone or I'm not tipping enough. And this really adds up. For example, I'm not getting as much coffee outside as I used to, because now with the iPads, I feel bad if I'm not.
Crazy, because I don't do that. Like, see, I live a real chill life. So tipping is just not something that even affects me, because I'm not going anywhere that requires tipping. Like when you go to the Walmart, you ain't got to tip nobody. You know what I mean? Like, but when you go all these fancy restaurants and stuff like that, you got to tip. They gonna feel bad about it. You know what I mean? But to each their own. I'm just not that type of person. I grew up with home cooked meal either way, so it was kind of hard either ways for me to eat out. I don't even eat fast food like that. So you get the point.
Giving a tip to the person who gave me a drip coffee. Anyways, I had promised you to tell you a bit more about why I left the US and if I would ever return. And the main reason why I don't live in the US is because when I was living in New York City, my visa was tied to my employment in investment banking. And when I became self-employed, I could only visit the US and not work there. So it was just easier to leave. At the moment, in any case, I would not qualify to be a permanent resident because I am not anywhere more than 6 months a year. Obviously, there's more to that, so feel free to leave a comment if you're really into immigration stuff. But if I had to go back, I would definitely want to be close to friends or family. So New York City, where I've lived, I have a lot of friends there. It has always felt like home to me. And I also love Chicago, where Bobby's from. We also have a lot of friends there. And
I think New York is probably the most ideal place for a European to go. It's a lot more hostile, a little bit less friendly, busy, walkable, expensive apartments, so that should be fun. I think New York is the best place for Europeans, in my humble opinion, across the United States. And things do happen there. People do get hurt in mass operations, but I think New York is a very, very beautiful place for Europeans to be at.
And it's always fun to visit and go back. But I wouldn't be against trying another US state. During my travels, my two favorite US states were Colorado for the nature and also Texas for the people and the food. As much as I love Texas barbecue, I'd probably miss the food quality in France. And if you want to know more about what I mean, I've made a full video breakdown comparing the food quality in France to the US.
Good video. The reality is, like I said originally, it's hard for her to actually, share the same beliefs that Americans who leave the United States would share. It's hard for her to share it because she never and will likely never really have those issues as a European, right? I think the only issue that she could run into is healthcare or what's the other one? Safety. I think those are the two issues that she could run into in the United States. And keep in mind that this safety issue is not something that you're going to just randomly experience every single time of the day in the United States. So I think it's going to definitely be varied, but you guys can let me know what y'all think about the United States, and would you ever live there, and what are the things that would bother you? Because obviously she spoke about the things that were great about the United States. She spoke about nothing that was, in my humble opinion, bad about the United States. The friendliness, small talk, whatever. Tipping culture was probably the worst thing she spoke about, right? So it was all in all a good video. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching. I'm out of here. Peace.